Hey, welcome to the Henophess Morning Show, where we talk about real health rooted in real traditions. So, just a disclaimer here, we do not diagnose, treat, prescribe. None of this information on the show is intended to do that. It's up to you how you use this information. I'm so excited to be here because I've got so much to talk about. I have days and days of information, if not a year worth of information to talk about. I'm not going to do it all today, right? I'm taking an hour a day where I'm going to talk, share some information, and about 15 to 30 minutes in, I'll allow people to actually call in and ask any questions that you have. We want to try to kind of stay with a topic that actually makes sense so it's beneficial to everybody instead of just randomly answering a bunch of just random questions. So if it's too random and it doesn't really add to the show, what I'm going to do is say, hey, we'll talk about that some other time. Down in the descriptions, you can find the phone number to actually call in. Now, I'm not going to mess around with people that just want to argue. If you want to argue, I'm going to respectfully hang up. But if you want to actually learn stuff and we can discuss, having different opinions is fine. So you'll get an opportunity to call in. Now, I'm going to talk about something that's just like been buzzing around in my head lately. But before I do that, let me share a little bit about me. I grew up with 11 siblings. Well, I'm one of the 11. So I grew up with 10 siblings, 8 sisters, and 2 brothers in the middle of nowhere in New Mexico. Dad delivered most of us at home, and he started working with clients in 1980. By the time I was 12, I was like, I want to do what Dad does. People go into his office not being able to walk, and they come out being able to walk, and I hear people say, "Oh, he saved my life." That's what I wanted to do. By 12 years old, I knew that's what I wanted to do. And being homeschooled, this has been the main course of my study for the past over 20 years. I started working with clients about 2016. My dad died about that time or somewhere close to that. Actually, I was working with him and I had started somewhere around, I don't know the time from there, but he died close to when I started my own clinics. And then I was running his clinics and my 3 other clinics. And during that time, I realized that there's a lot of information I have that a lot of people really want. And all this information I learned from my dad over those years of working with him. And I wanted to be able to get to more people. So what did I do? I shut down all of my offices and got into sales. And I was in sales for about 2 years while finishing my naturopathic degree. And then in 2020, I felt really strongly I had to get out of sales and just one-on-one work with clients. I need to do it right now. I'm like, okay. So I get out of sales and then I get scared. I'm like, I can't. I don't know anyone here. I don't know how to build up my audience. I don't know how to start to work with people. So I got scared and kept getting random jobs. That year absolutely sucked. I made like $10,000 that year. It was terrible. But when I finally was like, okay, fine, I will just call my old clients and see if I can do something from a distance. I will find anything. And I found this little health food store that I could actually work with, and I could work out of there back room and I could sell product and they'd make money on the product. I'd make money on my office visits. It's like, okay, let's do this. And when I 100% just said, I'm just going to see clients, within a year, I was seeing 140 clients a month without any advertising. You get people better, they talk about you. So um, I've had a lot of work working with clients and seen a lot of success. But something that's been bouncing around in my head recently, just like thinking about it, how much we over sterilize everything. I don't know if anyone thinks about that. Actually, especially after COVID, we're really anal about even covering it so we can't breathe anything from the air. We sterilize our hands constantly. We sterilize our skin. We even take things that sterilize our gut, and our solution for it is sterilization. Now, the reason some of this comes is because there's two really main paradigms that people go by, or that practitioners think in. Okay, and the more popular one that it's really hard to get people out of actually thinking that way is the germ theory. So the germ theory is that it's a parasite that makes us sick, or it's a viral that makes us sick. And apparently, if I put my thumbs up, it does this little bubble thing. Um, or it's a fungal or a germ or it's something along those lines that actually make us sick. Now, if it was just those alone, that if you interact with a parasite, you're sick, or you interact with viral and you're sick, or you interact with this and you're sick, we would all be sick equally, right? But because we aren't all sick equally, comes the paradigm of the terrain theory, which is the terrain that, or in a sense, is like two opposing forces. If you have a military force in your body and a military force on your skin, and all of this protective force that you have, and if your military force is weaker than whatever military force is coming on, the air force that's bombing your skin cells and bombing, or coming in trying to bomb your mouth and your sinuses and trying to make its way in to your country, if your forces are weaker, then it will take up residence inside you. It will find some way to get there, and then it will continue to fight your forces. And if your forces are too weak to kill it and get rid of its foothold, then you will be sick. And so you'll see some individuals don't get as sick as others because their terrain's better. They have a better military force that fights off all this garbage. If your military force is low, if your military force isn't strong enough on your skin, you should have an amazing military force all over your skin. And every time you sanitize your hands, what you do is you kill the opposing forces, but you also kill all of your forces, just straight genocide. You kill every bit of your military force on your hands. Now, there's no military force, and everything, only thing that's there now is just something that sterilized it. And it'll be there for a period of time. But once it's gone, there's open field that your force that you would like to have there, the positive bacteria and fungus and things that we need on our skin, may repopulate. There's room for it, but there's also room for anything that's around. So if you happen to go somewhere where sickness is, now your hands are more susceptible to it. You've given a foothold to that system. And then we sterilize our gut by taking things, and whatever it kills, now there's room for other garbage to take foothold. And so, yes, sometimes those types of things are necessary. I'm not saying it isn't necessary to sterilize your hands at times or to clean it. But then what do we do afterward? If you leave them sterile like that, then you have not put your military, if you don't get your military forces back on those hands, then those hands are now susceptible to whatever military force decides to take up occupation. And you don't want any part of you occupied with the garbage that makes you sick, right? But there's also this balance of this battle that goes on within us, in a sense that everybody's well, actually, in the natural field, I don't know how many out there in other areas talk so much about candida, but the candida, the yeast that's in our digestive tract, and that's what's generally not killed. If you take something that sterilizes your gut, it'll kill basically everything else besides the fungus, because it actually is made from an aflatoxin that fungus put off to kill everything else. So that means your yeast and your any fungus or mold or anything like that is allowed to continue to proliferate, but all of your bacteria is killed. Okay. Now, when that happens, you can get an overgrowth of fungus and rashes, yeast infections, and other garbage like that. Now, with all of this going on, there's a balance that needs to happen. And so if you don't balance and have the right good bacteria in there, and that balance in your gut between the bacteria and the fungus and all those things, and they put off things that kill each other and they keep each other in balance. If one overgrows, they become a problem. And so it's about creating balance in those. Now, if you do take something that basically sterilizes your gut to some degree, then you need to fill it back up. And now when you're filling it back up, and traditionally, well, we say traditionally these days, but what we call traditional medicine is not what has been around the longest. What I do with natural medicine, it's been around for over 4,000 years. Some of these methods that I use have been around forever. And probiotics haven't been around for as long. We think about those when we think about the gut, right? We think about taking a supplement that has living cultures in it that help to repopulate our gut. That's not a bad thing to do. And a lot of us get really good results with those kinds of things. And we kind of try to unsterilize the gut, but what about the skin? And what about the different areas? And so a lot of this is like sunk in and made me think. This is just like the introduction to this long process that I've been thinking about. It actually started many years ago when we had a cow, and I was learning how to make buttermilk without having to without needing to actually get buttermilk culture, or figuring out how to make cheese without getting cheese cultures, or figuring out how to make yogurt without having to buy yogurt cultures. Because all of those, how did we do it before we had those cultures? And what are those cultures today? They're just standardized cultures that are specific to growing a specific thing. So yeah, it makes it consistent and the same each time, but that doesn't mean that we don't get as much variety, even with like those cultures, and even if you're taking it in a supplement, you're probably getting 100 different varieties, 150 different varieties. If you were exposed to, back in the day, let's take a step back. So there used to be a lot of food traditions that we used to do a lot of fermenting. And this got me on this thought process of different fermenting. So we used to do wild ferments where we make like a sourdough that's just grown from the bread, and the sourdough, the natural yeast start to grow and things like that. A lot of people are familiar with sourdough, but I mean, wild ferment kimchi with vegetables, and there's traditions throughout the world of fermentation. Now, I went down the road of looking at, okay, just doing like, a ginger bug. Ginger bugs, where you chop up a little bit of ginger and you put it in some water, a dish with some water, well, a thing that generally caps on so it holds in the pressure, and you put it in with sugar, water, ginger, you put it on a lid, and you let it set, and you kind of burp it every so often. Sometimes you put in a little more sugar, and you make something you can make soda out of. And that has some live cultures and stuff in it that are great. And I was like, what if we did that with herbs and did that with um, all these different things, so we could pick up these wild cultures around and try to get a greater variety. So I studied that for quite a while, and I was looking at it as, oh, this is super cool. But the problem is that I can't really sell it. I could teach somebody to do this, and there's some exciting things on that aspect of like just blowing my mind. Now, looking at all of those different things and how much work it would take, and then looking at all the different ferment possibilities, I came to one. Now, I could go in, there's some fun things I can talk about ferments maybe on one of the other shows, but we don't have enough for all of them. So at this point, I'm going to continue to talk about fermentation. This is my first show, so I don't know how many people are out there listening, but if you're out there listening, you're welcome to call in. If you look in the description, it has the phone number, but the phone number is 816 826 1533. If you want to call in, you can call in at any point, but I'm just going to continue to talk about fermentation. So all of these different fermentation things, some of them take a lot of work. They can smell really funny in the process. I'm like, I need something that's easy. I need something that I can just do that's easy. But what I'm wanting is something that has a lot of variety of digestive enzymes. A lot of, not even just digestive enzymes, a large variety of bacteria and fungus and all of these things that are beneficial to us. And in doing herbs and doing plants, you get a lot of it, but actually the easiest thing to ferment and the easiest thing to get the widest variety of these cultures is actually through milk. It's actually to take a raw milk and to clobber it. You probably never heard the term clobbered milk. And how do you make clobbered milk? The way you make clobbered milk is you actually take milk, raw milk, and generally it's best that it's not been refrigerated or anything, like straight from milk in the cow. You set it out and leave it on your counter until it clobbers. You don't refrigerate it. You leave it out in 60, 70 degrees until it starts to separate the curds and the whey. And you'll have the white whey, and you'll have the yellowish curd. Well, sorry, the white-ish curd, and you have the yellowish whey. And that whey is going to have a lot of these cultures. In cow's milk, it said it can have anywhere like 50 to 100, and they're going to have different varieties in different animals. So in the cow, we'll have a certain variety. In goat, we have a different variety. We have some overlapping. And then you have in sheep, there's a different variety. And actually, camel, there's another variety. And between all of those varieties, there's actually a huge amount. It's say if we clobbered all of those milks and used them separately, we'd be exposed to like 800 to 1,000 different strains of these cultures that are good for our digestive tract. And that depends on what these animals have been eating, what they've been involved with, and other things like that, because their immune systems are adjusting and filling those up. In order to get that variety, you just can't get that variety anywhere else, in any ferments or anything like that. But if you actually clabbered the colostrum, so the colostrum is what a mother puts off milk wise very first, because that builds the animal's immune system, and it has a greater variety of these things. And if you actually clobbered the range of if you clobbered the colostrum from these animals, if you clobbered all of them separately and you use them separately, you would actually end up with a huge amount of cultures. You can end up anywhere from 2,000 to 2,400. It's insane the amount of different ones you could be involved with, which is huge for the digestive system and huge for just the way that our bodies operate. Now, clobber milk. Okay, you're like, okay, Scott, you're saying I should take milk and put it on the counter and let it rot, and then I'm gonna use it? Uh, yes, actually, but no, we're not letting it rot. If When there's good, healthy cow's milk or good, healthy milk, it should actually clobber, and when it clobbers, it should still not smell really disgusting. It should actually kind of have like a buttermilk kind of smell, and then it shouldn't have a terrible taste. It's not going to make you sick or anything like that. If it does smell really nasty, or there's mold growing on it or something like that, it didn't clabber properly. So if it clabbers properly, then it's not using that straight. Generally, I guess you could. I've tasted it. It's kind of like, ugh. So you could at that point um, make a soda out of it. You're saying make a soda, a milk soda? Yes, you can use it like a ginger bug, and you can take that clobbered milk, and you can put like a tablespoon or so in 16 ounces. You can even take a 16-ounce bottle; it can take pressure, and you can make a tea that you like the taste of. That's sweet enough to be able to. You want a little over sweet because it's going to eat up some of those sugars. You can take any fruit juices or anything like that, and you can make it into a soda, into a drink. And then when you drink that, all of that stuff that we created is going to be in that drink. Wonderful, full of all this wonderful stuff. I don't know if you've seen some of the things. I mean, I see different things than maybe you do on TikTok or other stuff like that, because it shows you what you look for. And so I've seen a lot of these videos about making your wild sodas with pine needles and all these different things. You can still do that kind of thing, but using your starter of this clobbered milk will actually pull in a greater variety of these cultures that we need in our digestive tract and throughout our whole body. Now, you make soda with it. Now you can take that same clobber milk and just the whey from that clobber milk, and you can put it in bread, and you can make bread. You'll make a bread that unless you do certain things, it's not going to be quite as fluffy as a regular yeast bread. It's not going to be as airy as like a sourdough bread, and it's not going to be as chewy. And it's not going to be as sour as a sourdough bread. But if you want it to have more of a similar texture to a regular bread, if you actually, when you're ready to do your final lift or your final raise, you actually stretch it out into a triangle, not triangle, in kind of a squarish piece that you will take a little baking soda water and sprinkle it on there, and then you roll it up with that. And that will actually make it rise even a little bit more. But you don't want to do that. You want to 30 minutes to maybe an hour before you actually put it in to let it rise. And then you can actually make a bread using your clobber milk. Now, what's the benefit of clobber milk versus using another thing in your bread? It's actually pretty cool because you'll get more B12 in that. Now, some of it, 60% of it's going to die in cooking because generally we're going to cook it pretty hot. But that bread is going to have a lot of the precursors, and it's going to have a lot of the precursors, digestive enzymes. It's awesome. Now, you can, if you want some of that B12 that can be grown, now you have to see, like, I'm not telling you exactly how much, but there's in these different milks, especially if you got like sheep milk or camel milk, which still sound hard to get. But I was wondering, like I live in Missouri, where would we even find something like that? And so I actually um, looked around, and there's actually you can get camel's milk here in Missouri. You can get it fresh. So I could get camel's milk, and I could make this clobber milk. And then when I make my soda, I could actually I could actually start a new culture in a sense that I grow it with some of the grain, and that would encourage more growth of the B12, and then a soda that would could possibly have a little bit more. Okay, you see this? Like my brain is just shaking with all of this information. There's so much more about fermenting and what you can use it for, and how does this even attach to the beginning of what we're talking about? So, because of this over sterilization, we've lost all of these traditions. We haven't just lost the traditions of getting all of these wonderful cultures in our digestive tract. We haven't just lost the traditions of fermenting our food. We've gone above and beyond that and then sterilized it. So, we aren't even doing those things that get it in the first place, and then we sterilize it. So, it's getting harder and harder to like bring that back. And that's why there's such a huge industry these days of things that you can take to actually restore those cultures in your digestive tract. But their variety is so minuscule compared to what we would have interacted with had we gone and rolled around in the dirt and or gardened and actually involved in this earth. We don't involve in this earth the same way. We are um, sophisticated, sterilized cavemen that live in these big caves, and then we keep everything as sterile as possible. We take bleach and we sterilize our surfaces, we sterilize our skin, we even put it in our water, and it sterilizes us just through showering. And then we use all these different products that just like sterilize everything, and we live in this sterile cave. And then we go outside and we wipe on some cave cover so we don't have to directly interact with the sun. And then we go and we get in our little cave to drive to our bigger cave to shop or to garden or for entertainment. But we don't actually interact with the earth a whole bunch. We don't actually get out and garden and touch things and involve in it. And we would have been involving and interacting with all of these different good and bad things that are floating around on the earth with the animals and all these different things, but we don't. And then we don't just not interact with them. Let's see. Nope, not somebody we're going to answer. So it's not just all of these interactions that we don't get, it's all of the sterilization on top of it. So with growing these, so the clobber milk we grow, you can also take that clobber milk and you could put it into a little bit of oil and wipe it on your skin. And now you would have all of these different cultures on your skin. This sounds really weird, doesn't it? It sounds really weird that we're going to take this and we're going to make it into something we can drink and make bread and wipe it on our skin. It's like, what in the world are you thinking, Scott? This is just weird. We're going to just cover ourselves in milk drippings. But we don't have those cultures. Where are you going to interact with it? Where are you going to go and interact with all of these different things? Do you interact with animals? Do you go out and actually garden? Do you go out and do all these things? And even if you are, do you have an environment that's actually hospitable to it? Or do you already have things that are so overgrown that have taken dominance that would obliterate anything that you get that would balance it? And so you might have to get a lot to create a new balance in your body. So, and actually getting access to some of these things isn't quite as hard as it sounds. And for some of you, it may be completely impossible to get access to clobber milk. Now, sadly, because of the laws and other things like that, we can't sell raw milk across state lines. Some states you can't even sell raw milk. And so to make your own, you're going to have to find a source, and then you can set it on the counter and let it clobber and practice with it. Now, when you make a clobber milk, that can also be turned into butter dough, sourdough. It can be made into a buttermilk starter. When you first use it, it can be a little funny. It's going to be about 3 generations. So you're going to use it in milk. So you're going to make, say you're going to make buttermilk. You take your clobber milk and you'd put it into your milk, and you let it set for a short period of time. I think it's about 24 hours or so. And no, actually, it's not 24 hours. It's only like 6 to 12 hours. And then once it's made your first batch of buttermilk, then you can take some of that buttermilk and make a new batch of buttermilk. And about the third time you do that, you're going to stabilize and have something consistent. It's going to regulate. It's not going to be as, it won't have as many varieties of cultures. It's going to be more stabilized to buttermilk type thing. Or if you take that clabber milk and you start a yogurt with it, and you set it out and you let it get thick, and you turn that to a yogurt. Now with your yogurt, same thing. It's going to be about 3 generations before you have a stable yogurt. But you're also going to have a less variety of these cultures that you would in the actual clabber milk. But they're still going to be really great. And they're probably going to be a lot better than what you get anywhere else, because everything that we consume, we think, oh, yogurt is so amazing for our digestive system. And yes, it can be, but we have such standardized things that we use for it, standardized cultures that are used. So we aren't even getting a variety, and it's always the same. That's why we get the texture exactly the same. But traditionally, it was not that way. We used it from our animals, and it depended on what interaction they had with the environment and stuff like that, on what it actually ended up being. So all of these wonderful things, these traditions that we think about, okay, we used to have to preserve our meat, and because of that, it broke down more. We had to do all these preservation processes because we didn't have refrigeration. And now, because we have refrigeration, we don't have to do any of those things. We can eat meat just fresh. But it used to be that it was always fermented or preserved with salt or something like that. So one of the fermentation processes, and actually you don't have to go to full fermentation, but you could actually take this clabber milk and put some spices in it, and then you could soak your meat in it and let it set for about, you need to go up to about 24 hours, but you let it set, and it would actually start to break it down and make it softer, and then you cook it. And that would actually make something that's a little more tender. And it also makes it so it's pre-digested the fats and the muscle, and it actually makes it easier for your digestive enzymes to do something with it. So it's just so cool what you can do with these things. So put on your food now. I just, like, in my head, I'm thinking, what are you thinking, Scott? All of these different things that you do, but then I come back to the fact, but how else? How else do we get all these cultures? How else do we actually strengthen our military force? There's herbs and all these things, but they don't necessarily, they strengthen the barracks, they strengthen the weapons, they strengthen the environment, but they don't necessarily directly get us new recruits. How do we get new recruits? If we are constantly in an environment that has all of this bad military force trying to get us sick, and obviously our military forces are being killed, how do we get new recruits to get in? We used to get new recruits constantly through our fermentation. We used to constantly get new recruits through just eating our food because it was fermented or preserved in different ways. We used to get new recruits by going and gardening and just messing with the soil and breathing in some of that, having it on our hands. We used to get new recruits from the fact that we'd wash the vegetables, but not everything would always get off of it. We get new recruits from eating berries while we're out picking them without even washing them. Some people, I heard a story the other day that, hey, I'm doing a show, little man. Did you want to come? Come here. Come say hi. I thought I locked the door, but come say hi. You want to say hi? You can't see anyone on there, but you want to say hi? Hello. This is my little man, Cody Kai. He's my only boy. I have 4 girls and Cody. Did you want me to do something for you, and you're gonna head out? Okay, open it. And then, okay, then you go back on out so I can talk. Okay. I did a show. You're gonna have these kind of things. It's about being raw and real. What's up, Cody? Good. So the only way we're getting new recruits is by doing some of these things. And the sad thing is, we could be so low with our military force that just the normal recruiting process may not be enough. If you all of a sudden started a homestead and everything like that and started to interact with the earth, it may still not be enough because you might not recruit fast enough. And you might have already a bad military force taking up so much residence in your body that you have to now bombard it and come in as the occupying force, and you have to come in and occupy the body sufficiently that now your main occupancy of your body is a good, healthy military force that helps your immune system, helps your body, versus distracting, hurting, or causing a problem for it. So just because I'm talking, guys, doesn't mean you can't just call in at any time. I understand this is the first show, so I doubt anyone's on just yet. But as people start to listen to it, we'll have more callers. So herbs will take care of the environment, make it possible. Now that's another reason why sometimes just interacting isn't enough, because we might have a hostile environment to our military forces. We might have more our water might be poisoned and make them sick, or our um, foods that we consume might be so refined that it's harder for them to function. We might have a variety of different things that are very hostile to our military forces in our body, and we might have things that are very beneficial. But the thing is, if we don't have that balance, if we don't have a good input of these, get new recruits constantly, and if we aren't taking care of the military force that we have in our body, then we will become susceptible and more susceptible to whatever happens to be floating around. We'll be more susceptible to viruses and fungal and parasites and all of those different things, because our immune system won't have as good of a response. It won't have as many military forces to just take up space so nothing can get on. But on top of that, won't have as much won't have as much of an ability to go after and kill and deal with and mess with all of these different things. So digestively and skin wise, and you could even use this clobber milk. You could put it in oil, and you could actually put it in your sinuses and a variety of things. Now, this is all experimentation. If you do decide to do any of these things, recognize you are taking something that is a raw milk that the FDA has said is just bad, and then you are going to clobber that, and you're going to concentrate whatever's in it, and then you're going to use that. Now, as long as that cow is healthy, and as long as when you do that, it smells good, and actually, well, it's going to smell sour, of course, and it's going to have like a pretty sour taste to it, but it shouldn't be like rotten milk. It shouldn't be disgusting. Um, Although it's not great. I don't like the taste of buttermilk. But when you do this, it has the potential of doing so much for our bodies. We've lost so many of these different traditions. Now, why would I start with this subject? Why would I start with the subject of the digestive system and all of these cultures? Partially because it's just been on my head a lot. And one of the reasons it has is because I grew up in New Mexico. And growing up in New Mexico, it's a dry place, and I didn't interact with the same things I am here in Missouri. And most of the time here in Missouri, I've worked with clients digitally like this, and I'm not as much out in the dirt. But I went and I helped a friend out in the dirt. And when I came back from helping him, I had this little thing on my arm. It was like a little blood blister, and I scratched it off or whatever, and then it got a little bigger. And I scratched it, and it was like spreading. And at first I thought, oh, maybe this is poison ivy. And that's what a lot of the Google searches, when I took a picture of it, looked like it was poison ivy. Now, the thing is, poison ivy shouldn't spread, except for with the oil. If the oil has interacted with the skin, it's not spreading. But this was spreading a little bit. So it was probably, now this is just my guess, it's probably something fungal. And that got me on this idea, okay? Because if the microbiome of my skin had a good enough military force, it would have been less likely that that cropped up. And I've seen many people that have moved out to Missouri from drier places, that they're getting this kind of similar thing happening. And I believe it's because we're interacting with new varieties of fungus and other things that are in the soil that aren't there where we grew up. Now, I spent a lot of time in the dirt and playing with things and other stuff like that. So I actually have a lot of those different things, but the microbiome of this area is different. And I believe if I clobbered some milk and some other things like that from the local area, that I would actually be exposed to these different things and actually what manages them. Now that's just a belief. I'm not telling you that that's exactly what happened, but that's what got me thinking about this. Is like, okay, this has come out. I found what I need to do with it. At first, I was listening to advice. Oh, don't put this on it. Don't put that on it. And I tried some things. And I was like, okay, none of this is working. This is stupid. So I'm just going to use what I always use. So I just used our skin irritation salve and just kept putting it on there until it cleared up. But there's so many different things that we'll interact with, and we used to, if we went to a new area, we'd be interacting with the dirt and other things like that. And if we already had good cultures in our system, our military forces would adjust and get used to the actual environment. And it takes a little while to get used to the environment, but something that would help you to adjust is something that these animals that are local to the environment and dealing with the environment and all of these different things that they create in their milk could be used to actually reestablish your microbiome for your area. So here's something fun. You want to hear something fun? All these processes. Now, a lot of this, if you don't find this interesting, all of this information is coming out of my head, then maybe this show isn't for you, because I'm going to be discussing different things that just, my plate is so full of information that I just need to let some of it out. I gotta just talk about it. I gotta get it out. But I want to be able to answer your questions as well if you call in. So the lost my frame of thought. So the microbiome that we create and the health of this system is so important. And I totally forgot where I'm at. So this will happen occasionally because I went on a tangent and then I don't know where I was. And my brain just... well, let's talk about what we're going to do next time. So actually, we're only about halfway through this show. It's pretty good. I'm glad that I have so much time to actually get this stuff out. When I talk next time, we're going to talk about sleep. There's some really cool sleep things that I'm going to talk about. Really fun. And I'll share a story towards the end about my little kid and what helped them with some of these sleep things. Oddly enough, actually, our digestive system affects everything. It affects sleep. It affects the way we pick up nutrients. It's where everything begins. If you consume something, if it doesn't break down properly, if it doesn't interact with the right digestive enzymes, if it doesn't interact with the right stuff, it just passes out of our body useless. So taking care of the immune system can help with us actually being able to sleep as well. And using these traditions, if we start to reclaim some of our traditions and start to actually use the bread making process, and because bread, I told you, if we use you can use sourdough, but you can use this as a sourdough, and it's just a liquid. Now, the reason most complaint people have about sourdough is that it takes so much to keep a sourdough starter. And with clabber milk, you set your milk out for 12 to 24 hours or 24 to 48 hours until it clobbers, and you can use it. And so it actually, if you put your sourdough in a fridge, you're actually going to have to warm it up for about 24 hours before it's going to work real well anyways. But with the clabber milk, you can basically make it in the time you'd have to warm up your sourdough. If you're making bread every day, sourdough makes sense for some other people, but it doesn't always make sense to do sourdough because of the work it takes. And that's why I like the clobbered idea, because you can use the clabber milk to start your bread. And then you're growing some wonderful things in the bread, and it's easier to actually start and do. It's not something that has to take a massive amount of time. Now, when it comes to bread as well, I'm going to have to do a show just on bread, because I learned a lot when I decided. Everybody tells you when you make bread, you should start with white bread because it's easier. And then after you learn how to make white bread, then you should make wheat bread. No. That is the wrong way to do it. And the reason is because the principles of making white bread are completely different than the principles of making a whole wheat bread. They're completely different. They're completely different beasts. they are not the same. For instance, with white bread, when you make a white bread, you knead it. The more that you work it, the more you develop the gluten strands. With wheat bread, the more you work it, the more you break down those gluten strands because the fiber that is in the wheat acts like glass to the strands and you actually cut it up. And that's why you'll get a really crumbly bread. So if you learn how to make white bread and then you transition to making a whole wheat bread, you will get a crumbly, fall apart loaf. But if you learn how to make wheat bread for the sake of making wheat bread and it is a completely different thing, then you're not going to have as bad of results. So I found there's a process where you can develop gluten strands either by work or by time. It's either by how much you work it or how much time you leave it alone to set. So if you make a sourdough, for instance, and usually you're folding it a lot, but basically it's a no knead, or if you're making a yeast bread, you can actually mix up everything except for your yeast before and add a little bit of vinegar to it and let it set for about 8 to 12 hours. And then at that point, you put in your yeast and you work it just enough to incorporate. You only work this enough to incorporate. That's it. And then you let it set. You actually get something that slices and functions a lot more like regular bread because you didn't work it as much. And so same with this clabber milk bread. It just basically you mix it all together and let it set. And then when you're ready to actually do your final proof, you stretch it out and you put your baking soda water on there and roll it up and put it in. And then that's going to have a better texture than if you work it. So we're going to have to do it. And I'll talk about bread making a little bit later, but some of those principles, if you already know about making bread, some of those principles might help you out. You can't, if you want to switch to using just whole wheat bread, you have to do a no knead process. You can only touch it minimally. And that's why it's easier. If you're going to use a yeast, you have to actually do most of your bread making process without the yeast. And then you have to introduce the yeast just for the last little bit of proving, just for the actual final rise in the morning. So you kind of start in a sense, you do your normal bread making process after you've let they call it a sponge. Sometimes they call it a sponge method or whatever. You let that set for long enough before you introduce the yeast. And when you do that, you can actually make a bread that holds together. I've done it. It's actually pretty awesome the way that it rises, and it's wonderful. And it's super cool to be able to use those and have something that's nice versus, oh, wheat bread's always crumbly. It doesn't have to be. And it can be full of all this wonderful nutrients. And, oh, bread makes us fat and all these things. It doesn't have to. It's actually because of all of the stuff that we're missing. We're missing so many different things from our digestive tract, from our cultures, and everything that we could actually positively use. So next time I was I was sleeping, and I hear my son just screaming like something happened terribly to him. So you know how it is. You wake up real fast, and you run into the room, and you're in the room before you even realize you're awake. You're like, oh, what's going on? And he's screaming and crying, like, what the heck is happening to him? And so I hold him, and he's still screaming and crying. I'm trying to talk to him, and he's just like not responding to me. He's just irate. And this happened for like 3 nights in a row. And then on the third night, I remembered, okay, there's something that my dad told me to do that I've seen work with clients as well that I should do with him. And when I did it, it actually made a huge difference, and he started sleeping the rest of that night. Actually, within just a couple minutes of giving it to him, he slept, and then he slept I had to do that a couple more nights, and I haven't had to do it since. He's just been doing really good for the last couple months. But it's amazing what it actually does. And if you want to find out what that was, come tomorrow and watch the show, and I will talk about that first thing. Okay? So any questions that you guys have, you're welcome to put it on the video afterward. I'll be checking in on those a little bit here and there. I'll be following up. But in your lives, start to think about ways that you can minimalize sterilization. If you want to improve health, you need to start thinking about ways to minimalize sterilization. That doesn't mean that you don't clean up and get rid of garbage stuff. You need to do that. But for instance, in your shower, you can get a shower head that actually removes chlorine, so you aren't sterilizing your skin quite as much. You can, on your surfaces and other things like that, you can use different things besides bleach. There's other stuff besides sterilization that bleach is damaging for your body. There's so many damaging things about that. But think about cleaning it and not just over sterile. We're just so obsessed with over sterilizing everything, as over sterilizing our skin and everything like that. Yes, clean up, make sure everything's clean, but as it goes for over sterilization, don't do it. You can even, if you wanted to start with something, if you got a good healthy yogurt that has live cultures in it, you could actually put some of that on your hands, just a little bit, maybe some lotion after you sterilize your hands, and it'll actually, well, you have to wait for the sterilization to like go away. It's actually cleared up and it's not killing stuff still. So once you hit that range of it's not still killing, you could actually put some of that on your hands. Or if you're a sourdough maker, if you make sourdough bread, you're actually already doing that. They found when they test the cultures on sourdough on women's hands, they make sourdough, or men's hands, they make sourdough, their hands have the same cultures that they would find in the bread. They basically have their sourdough culture right on their hands. You could actually culture your sourdough by taking what's on your hands and actually getting that into your bread, and that would actually be, in a sense, a starter. So the same cultures are living on the hands. So for someone that does sourdough, their hands aren't going to stay sterile as long. Even if they sterilize them, they're going to work with the sourdough. And it's going to actually rebuild that. So working with sourdough could be a very healthy, beneficial thing. Even not even just eating the bread, just the fact of making it would put cultures back on your hands. And it's going to be a little bit of it's airborne, so you're going to pick some of it up in the air, but you're going to touch yourself. You're actually going to populate some of that into your sinuses and your mouth and other things when you actually work with this. And actually washing your hands too much after you make sourdough, you're just washing off these wonderful things that could be on your hands. Yeah, clean up with water and stuff, but don't scrub it off too much, because if you leave it on there, it's actually wonderful things to have throughout your body. And it's stuff that's actually going to be dead once you make your bread. Actually making your bread, and once you eat, touch other things and eat, or touch your mouth or your nose, you're actually helping some of those things to actually end up in your digestive tract. So don't sterilize your hands after your sourdough, because what's in your sourdough is wonderful. It's beautiful, awesome stuff. And there's so many different things. If I was going to say one thing, because on the subject of sterilization, if there's one thing that you could eliminate, you could find something else to use instead of it, it'd be bleach. There's actually, you can go on Amazon, you can find in restaurants, they have options of different things to sterilize. And one of them is actually iodine. You can go online and you can find a iodine cleaning solution that you can just water down. You just put a couple drops in your water and it makes it sterilized like chlorine would, except it's iodine instead, which is much more beneficial. We're going to have to talk about another subject where how chlorine actually prevents the utilization of iodine in our bodies and actually can mess with our thyroid and other things like that. And so it'd be very beneficial. It's not as toxic or damaging to use iodine as your cleaning substance versus using chlorine. Now, when I first heard that, I was like, is it going to stain everything orange? No, it's actually watered down enough. It's not going to stain everything orange, but it can sterilize things. If you are going to be sterilizing stuff, I would sterilize it with iodine or something along those lines. I wouldn't use bleach. If you can eliminate that, it's amazing. I've seen women that have terribly painful menstrual cycles, and when they eliminate the bleached tampons, the ones that are much more white, you can get cotton ones that aren't bleached, and when they do that, it's significant for someone, not all women, the ones that are more sensitive to it, it's significant what it does for their pain, for the consistency, for all kinds of things when it comes to their menstrual cycle, by actually switching up to something that doesn't sterilize that area, because it also has cultures, but also it's just the ovaries are going to use iodine second to your thyroid. Thyroid wants the most iodine. And then what wants the most iodine after that is actually one's ovaries. And you putting that bleach in there actually messes with the way that that actually works. And the way the body, so sometimes just switching from that. You can switch one thing. Now, maybe not making all these cultures and populating your whole body and other things like that with all of these wonderful cultures maybe is not possible at this moment. And that's not what this show today was about. It was about opening up your eyes to all these possibilities. So if you could eliminate some of the things that sterilize or switch to better sterilization things. Honestly, the closer to your natural source, the better you are. That iodine soap stuff, you're actually better off using that as your hand sanitizer than you are regular hand sanitizers, or even just going and getting, you can get Everclear, and it's really strong alcohol, and you're better off using that than you are a lot of the hand sanitizers, because the more processed they have more other detrimental aspects besides this just sterilization. We don't just sterilize, but we sterilize with things that actually cause other problems. So if you can at least, like, if you're going to still sterilize, do it with things that aren't as damaging, as hurtful to your body overall. So there's an iodine cleaner. You just Google or just search on Amazon, iodine sterilization cleaner or iodine cleaner for kitchens, and it'll come up. And that is so much better. And you can use it just like you would bleach cleaning throughout your house. And that would be so much better. Even though you're still probably over sterilizing things, it's still better than not just over sterilizing, but now you have bleach. That's not so great. It is just such a big thing these days. To use, it's chlorine is what it is, and the chlorine that they use in all of these different concentrations for this, it is just so detrimental to have that so involved in everything. I mean, it's in our water, it's in our cleaning supplies, it's in feminine products, it's in so many different things. It's even when they, your flour being as white as it is, it's bleached. And so all of these different areas that just over sterilize everything, even our food is over sterilized. So hopefully this gave you a little bit of idea and opened up your eyes to some of these possibilities. And as we go along, if you guys want to learn more, I probably need to do a class, just a full-blown class on fermentation and using milk and things like that. And that's most definitely an option, as people are more interested in actually doing this. If you are interested, just leave some comments, and I'll be doing this every day until I run out of things to talk about. I'm going to be 1 hour here talking about stuff. Now, it's not going to be a full hour of me talking every time, because more and more people are going to watch, and as they watch and jump on and ask questions, I won't spend as much time just talking about a subject. But until then, you got to come and geek out with me. I geek out on this stuff. I think it's so great. There's so much stuff. My wife, when people come over to visit, I generally listen and just kind of someone in the conversation. When it gets talking about natural health or illnesses and things like that, that's generally where I liven up and I talk a little bit more, because that's my thing. But my wife is always like, now it's time for the herb portion of the evening. So this is the herb, it gives me the opportunity to do the herb portion of the evening, in a sense, and get out all of this information. It's for those individuals that geek out on this information, or just somebody that just wants to introduce to it. Now, this isn't intended for you to have to listen through the whole thing. Get on, get off, just kind of listen to it. I imagine that moms, or that's why it's at this time, because moms are generally my audience, that moms can just put it in their ears and do whatever they're doing at that time. I'm hoping it hits somewhere after you've dropped your kids off, and an opportunity to just kind of listen to something and start to intrigue. Now, none of this, you don't want to feel bad about, oh man, I'm not doing my kids the right thing because they're not getting enough cultures or other things like that. Sorry, I need some more of this anti-spasm. Stuff's terrible. It tastes yucky, but it makes it so I can talk. And it helps to get rid of the spasms in the lungs and stuff. Ugh. Yucky stuff. So, if you You don't have to worry about following all these things. It's just somebody as a civilian, you want to start to learn how to implement these things, let me know. Just by starting to use the right things for cleaning substances could start to change health, could start to make a difference. It's not bad to clean, but to over sterilize is most definitely a problem. Man, I got the hiccups now from that. That was cool, wonderful. That makes this now you just see me do the hiccups for a little bit. So use good cleaning materials and think about it. If you don't have to sterilize it, why sterilize it? There's things good, bad. Yeah, there might be some bad things, but there might also be some good things, and it's good for your body to interact with all those different things. Take some time to get out and actually spend some time digging the dirt or playing the dirt. Let your kids play in the dirt. It's a great thing for them. But even if it's not out where they've sprayed a whole bunch of stuff, it's probably still over sterile from what it should be. So tomorrow, same time, I'm gonna be here talking about this every weekday. I'll be talking about a different subject. Just what happens to be on my mind. We'll see how long I can go. Once I run out of things to talk about, I'll probably go to once a week doing this show. But for now, it's a daily thing to just like get everything out of my brain that I've been thinking of. Or we might kind of come back to the subject because right now I'm actually going to be starting making bread again. It's been a while since I made bread, but I'm going to start experimenting making bread because I told you some things that are more theory. I haven't done a lot of clabber making bread. I've done a yeast water bread, and I've done just with the yeast after I've let it soak. I've done a variety of different wheat breads. I've actually never made a white flour bread. I've only made it with actual whole wheat. And because of that, I hear all of these principles of doing it. And I'm like, no, wheat bread is completely different. I'm glad that I learned how to make wheat bread the first time versus everybody says make a white bread because then if it's harder to fail at, and then from that you know how to make bread and you can do the other. Now, if you haven't started making bread, start with wheat bread. If you want to learn how to make wheat bread, make wheat bread. If you want to learn how to make white bread, make white bread. They're different in their processes. And one of the main things is how much you work it. Do not work it. Sorry, just going back into the bread. Bread making is going to be fun. I'm going to do that over the next little while. I got to get my grinder working because I grind my own flour. I've got to get several different things set up so I can actually do it. And then I'll probably move this setup into my kitchen and we'll talk about bread making and some of those principles that are actually beneficial. Because do you realize that about 200 years ago, there was a book written that they were saying it's only recent that we even have to put yeast in our sweetener in our bread because our breads aren't, our flour isn't freshly ground anymore, and so it's not sweet enough to interact with the yeast. But it didn't always happen, and so she was writing that in a common day that day, actually it was over about 300 years ago, that she was saying that on average people would eat a pound of bread a day each, and on average they were smaller than us, they're healthier than us. Now everybody's going to think, oh, what about genetic modification, all those things? That's not the only thing. We've lost traditions. There's so much that it's not just about the flour. We're blaming on the grain itself, but most everybody doesn't know how to even process that flour, that grain, the way that it was processed back in that day. If it was processed the same way and you made the bread the same way, even if we were using these subpar grains, it would still be beneficial. So, sayonara. See you tomorrow. We'll talk about sleep, and maybe I'll talk a little bit more about bread because I'm excited about bread these days. So the bread is so cool. And one of the things I have to mention before we go. So one of the most detrimental things for our grains is not actually the genetic modification. It is the lack of health in the soil. If you take a white kernel, a white soft wheat, and if you plant it in healthy soil, the only thing you will be able to grow is hard wheat. It cannot grow a soft wheat. And it's because the mineral density and everything has changed, and it's because our soil allowing these things grow. Yes, we've hybridized and encouraged that process, but it's not the end all. So grains are not the enemy you think they are. We'll talk about that.